Since 2004, I've been working in new media, and I'm actually partnered with Ed Lance, who's on the panel, and we own a 50-foot immersive cinema dome downtown, so I've delved into the whole VR experiential space through that. But I'm also on the national board of the Producers Guild and the New Media Council, and very involved in education. So I think these types of events are so fabulous for getting everyone up to speed on all the amazing things that are happening that we're all trying to keep track of. So we have some wonderful experts here this afternoon. And what we're going to do is just each person's going to go through and introduce themselves and a little bit about their company and what they're up to in relationship to this topic. So we'll start with Jason Shugard, who's the visual effects supervisor at MPCVR. So thank you, Jason.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you. My name is Jason Shugard. I work for MPC, that's Moving Picture Company. I'm a visual effects supervisor for VR. It's a new division. Our company mainly works on film and advertising projects over 9 different offices worldwide. You might have seen Jungle Book for the film department. Advertising, we did the Tilt Brush multimedia experience last winter. For our VR department, I work with Tim Dillon, our EP, and a small team of artists. Last week, if you were on VR on the lot, you might have seen our Kygo music video, basically Carry Me, which is our first PlayStation music video, and which released last week. Prior to that, we were showing at an event for Nature Conservancy, which was an educational PSA about saving the fisheries. The week before that, we released One Republic, a music video called Kids, directed by Hal Kirkland. That was a 360 omnidirectional stereo piece shot on the Nokia Ozo. And then we've also done film projects for VR. There was for Comic-Con, we did a Suicide Squad promotional piece. And the summer before that, we did a theatrical release for a promotional piece for Goosebumps, which was partnered with D-Box. This basically sat inside of a ride share that was put on in front of the theaters for 2 weeks before the movie came out, which was a VR moment for a ride along with Jack Black as you were chased by a 60-foot praying mantis. So it's been a fun ride. So definitely things have picked up over the last year, and I think if the questions are where has it come or where is it going, I think there's a big energy building, and over the last year, I'm looking forward to seeing more things to come.
So next we have Michael Tolkien, who's the founder and CEO of Ultra Labs. Michael.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me. So I used to run IMAX Labs, the innovation arm of IMAX Corporation, responsible for developing new businesses outside of IMAX's core. So things like virtual reality, immersive applications out of the home. We developed and launched a new fitness experience called IMAX Shift. Our first studio is based in Brooklyn. And basically, just imagine being immersed in IMAX while you're riding on a bike. So you have the screen, the audio, and then the whole thing's gamified. So it's a highly interactive fitness experience. And so we're really excited to see where that goes. And now I run a company called Ultra Labs. We're basically an innovation lab spanning content development to consumer electronics to out-of-home experiences, and of course digital media and VR. We have a company called Rooms.com, which is VR and immersive for the home design audience. We have a bunch of other products that we'll be releasing toward the end of the year and in early 2017. If you guys have any questions, particularly around out-of-home experiences versus headsets, happy to delve into that.
Okay, thank you. Next is Ed Lance, who's a MEE, member of the Producers Guild and founder of Vortex Immersion Media.
Thanks, Gabe. My specialty, and I thought I'd show some images just because it's a little hard to get sometimes, is creating immersive 360 experiences out of the home using primarily dome projection. It could be a full sphere, it could be a hemisphere, It could be a cubic room where you project on all the walls. But my background, actually, I came out of a planetarium science center market and designed 14 digital domes around the world, helped to pioneer that format. The way I see the domes now, it's essentially part of the immersive media ecosystem is what I call it. So VR, maybe AR, mixed reality. This is actually, the domes are a special set of what's called spatial augmented reality, which is where you project onto environments around you. So it's instead of like the Matrix where you opaque out the world and to enter cyberspace, here we look to bring cyberspace into a room with us. We have a innovation lab downtown LA. It's called the Vortex Dome, and it's a 50-foot dome. We do live performances, prototype content, do screenings, all kinds of crazy stuff there. This is just a little sizzle reel here. I'll spare you the dubstep. So this is a couple of 4D theaters we did at Comic-Con, one for NBC Universal, Constantine, the other for Adult Swim. And these are little 50-seat theaters. We have wind blowing in your face here. I see Audrey in the crowd. She lost a few nights' sleep over that one. We had 6 weeks to produce this show and 3 weeks to get the script approved, so we had 3 weeks of animation crunched. So one of the things that we're really keen on doing is mixing live performance with an immersive environment. So it's really a special kind of a thing. There's a scene here coming up of a dance party. It was an MTV. Here we go. It's a pilot for MTV. But the idea is you multicast a dance party out globally, and people dance in their webcams, and we bring their pictures back into the dome, so it's a global dance party, right?
I would do that every night.
It's fun stuff. So anyway, there's all kinds of projection mapping and other stuff we do. Some recent projects, we had a dome at the VFX Film Festival in Korea this year. We were invited out there. And we did a 160-foot diameter dome in the Joshua Tree Desert for Donald Glover, otherwise known as Childish Gambino. And that was a 2,500 person dome. We had 12 projectors, 360. It was pretty cool. It got really good reviews. So that's it.
Cool.
Yep.
Awesome.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Next, we have Dave Cobb, who's the Vice President of Creative Development for ThinkWell Group.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. Dave Cobb. I'm the Principal of Creative Development for ThinkWell, and we are a strange little multidisciplinary experience design firm with offices based here and in China and in the Middle East. The best way to think of us is we were formed by a former Universal Studios theme park guy, a former Disney theme park guy, and a former Cirque du Soleil guy. So you put that in a blender, and that's what we do. We're like a boutique Imagineering, if you will, and work on storytelling experiences in the real world, and everything from theme parks to museums to cultural attractions and everything in between. You can check us out at thinkwellgroup.com. We're most known for the making of Harry Potter, which is 170,000 square foot, 3.5-hour walking tour through all of the sets, props, and costumes from all 8 films at Leavesden Studios, where the films were created, just outside London. We also did a touring exhibit for Lionsgate based around the Hunger Games, and we're currently working on a major unannounced attraction in another part of the world that uses a number of VR components for different attractions and uses VR in about 4 or 5 different ways throughout the space. Having said that, while we do use VR a lot, and we actually use it a ton from a design standpoint, inward facing, we use it all the time for previs and simulation. I'm actually here to be kind of the cranky naysayer about VR in theme park attractions for various reasons. So I look forward to the discussion.
Awesome.
Thank you. Next is Jim Stewartson, who is the CEO of Awesome Rocket Ship.
You guys don't want to see my Skype, do you?
Well, that depends.
Hold on a second. God. PowerPoint sucks.
Doesn't it?
It'll
So
mirror.
bad. Yeah, I know. It was mirroring.
There we go.
There we go. Come on now. Yay. Let's see. Work with me now, PowerPoint. We can do this together. Shit. Maybe not. Hold on.
Damn you,
I'm almost
Microsoft. There you
That's
go.
2011. You gotta get 2016.
In the interim, I think it would be helpful for all of us if, while he's pulling that up, if just by a show of hands, who,
South left.
What's that?
Go down.
Yeah.
Left corner.
There you go.
Yeah.
you.
2 over from that.
Yeah, right
That one,
there.
little button right there.
Thank
There you go.
Yeah. Whatever. We'll do it like this.
well, I was just going to ask really quickly, how many of you would consider yourselves virtual reality insiders, people who are really familiar with VR? And then the rest of you presumably are interested in learning more?
VR curious.
VR curious. There you go. Awesome. That's
VR
really
skeptic.
helpful. Thanks.
VR skeptic.
Yeah.
So I thought I was going to be the jaded curmudgeon in the group. So we'll have a. Yay! Oh my god!
Woo! Good job. Gold star.
Thanks. I'm in technology.
Click the button.
So I'm Jim. I'm CEO of Awesome Rocket Ship. So a little background. My first VR startup was in 1995, which I think gives me a little bit of credibility to be the jaded VR curmudgeon of the group. I've seen this movie before. I've seen the hype and then the disappointment and then the dead bodies and craters and crying and screaming in the streets.
Preach.
After this happened the first time. Now, to be fair, a lot of things have gotten better about VR, but a lot of things haven't. So if my goddamn power plant would work, what?
There we go. Look at that.
Yay. So that's from Lawnmower Man in 1992.
Yeah.
That's a CV1. Somebody explain the difference to me. So to be fair, that's a $50,000 headset. That's a $600 headset. That was guaranteed to make you sick, and that one is only more or less guaranteed to make you sick. So I think we have a long way to go before we're going to get to mass consumer adoption. Before we're going to have tens of millions of these things in people's living rooms, we got to fix that, among other things. Now, there are analysts out there that disagree with me, but first I'm going to show you a totally unnecessary shot of Brett Leonard, who directed Lawnmower Man in one of our pods, because that was the geekiest moment in the entire history of my life, which is saying something. So there are a bunch of analysts who disagree with me about VR. So I read an article recently that said, amazingly, that there will be 337 million headsets by 2020, and that AR and VR will be a $162 billion market by 2020. So just to put that in perspective, there were 230 million television sets sold last year and 40 million game consoles. In terms of revenue, the entire global box office was $40 billion, and all of video games were $100 billion. So if I have my math right, once we get rid of the movies and video games, we still have $22 billion left to figure out. But we'll get there.
Details.
So another piece of info. So on average, consumers spend about $60 a year on video games. So let's go crazy. Let's assume for every HMD in the home that we're going to make $250 a year as an industry, right? So for every 100,000 HMDs in the in-home market, which is about what Oculus and Vive have, you make $25 million a year, which sounds okay, but there's a hell of a lot more than $25 million that has been invested in VR. So in the out-of-home market, we can make $250 a day with an HMD. The economics of out-of-home versus in-home VR are very different. It's much more highly leveraged out-of-home. And so with 100,000 out-of-home HMDs, we can make $9 billion a year as an industry. Now, the pathway to get to 100,000 HMDs out of home is not short and is winding and perilous. But you can see that from my point of view, out of home is where the revenue is going to happen first. It doesn't mean that we're not going to have living room VR all over the place, but in my humble opinion and my jaded curmudgeonness, I think out of home is where it's going to happen, which brings me to my company, and I'll go fast. So we work with content studios, hardware makers, infrastructure and logistics companies, and we provide everything in between them and getting venues really, really high-end premium VR. So we provide hardware, we install, we staff, we maintain, and we provide content. So this is a picture of one of our pieces of hardware that we use to distribute VR. A couple of things about it. So it's got this canopy over the top. So one of the things, how many people have done VR in like a crowded space? So if you get bumped into in a crowded space, it's really disturbing. It's like the hand of God reached out of the sky and threw you across the room, and you had no warning whatsoever, right? So there's a psychological safety zone that we create when we have this. Also, the tether can come down from the top, which is convenient, and the chair rotates 360 degrees, which VR safety tip is the cheapest and most effective form of interactivity imaginable. So if you're doing VR, really consider putting somebody in a swivel chair because it's so much more awesome than going like this the entire time. So when you put 8 of them together, you get this really cool, awesome rocket ship looking thing. We also, I should say, have motion control and airflow. We have haptics, which does two things. One, it takes the immersive quality of VR from here to here, and it also counterintuitively, effectively eliminates nausea and dizziness from VR. So if you're in a gear or something and the camera moves, your brain goes back to caveman days and it says, dude, you're hallucinating. You ate some bad bear meat or mushrooms or something, throw up real quick before you die. And so when you give the body and the brain a little bit of reassurance that it's where it is, your brain goes, oh, I get it, I'm here, and just completely shuts that whole thing down. So something to keep in mind. And when we put it out in places, it looks pretty cool. So shopping malls, movie theaters, trade shows, theme parks, basically anywhere there are human beings that want to be entertained. That's it.
Thank you.
You bet.
Since I have a quick question for you, Jim, 2 questions actually. Is your device rocket ship, right? Is it anywhere here in LA yet? Is it anywhere where we can see it? Folks
It
can
will.
see it?
It
And
will
when
be
will it be?
very soon.
Soon? Okay.
No, we're actually we're going to be launching in Korea, China, India, Las Vegas, and Los Angeles in the next several months.
Okay. And who is producing your content? Where's the content
everybody.
coming from? Everybody?
Yeah, so we're in Hollywood. I've been around for a while, so I know most of the studios and most of the companies making VR right now. And our proposition to content creators, by the way, is fairly unique, which is, hey, why don't you give us your crazy awesome content and then we'll write you a check every month. People really like that idea.
So for you content creators.
And it's a fairly rare, pitch. So
Where do I sign for this?
Exactly. So anyway.
Okay. And what approximately is the longest experience that you're showcasing, time-wise?
Right now, we're focusing 5 to 10 minutes. Some of that is a function of the fact that without motion, people, like 8 to 10 minutes is where a lot of people start getting sick. It goes from, this many people to like 2/3 of the people. And also for somebody who's doing it for the first time, you don't want to like overwhelm them because they're just going to be like, holy shit, right? Like, and so they only need that much. Over time, we're experimenting with longer pieces of content. The Martian is 25 minutes, and we think that's a really good piece for our platform. So I don't know how long content's going to end up being.
Okay.
And I'll stop in a sec. One of the things that I see VR as is right now is basically where the movies were before 1916. So it was Nickelodeons and penny arcades, right? Sorry, you'd look at a box and there was a horse running in the box and you go, oh my God, how'd you get the horse in the box? And with VR, it's the same thing. It's like, oh, whale, whoa, and that's it. But when people started telling stories with film, that's when you had Paramount, MGM, Warner Brothers, Fox, Universal, RKO, and Columbia all happen within the same 5 years. And I think that we're basically right at that exact point right now, where people are starting to tell really good stories, and that's going to transport it to a different place. It's still going to take time. But
And one last quick question is, how are people paying for the experience? Is it ticketed,
With
or is
money.
it credit card swipe? Or how is
Cold
that?
hard
How does that
cash.
work? Coin operated?
we have a POS, a point of sale system,
Okay.
and so they can give us a credit card or cash or
Okay.
their first child or whatever.
Blood.
Thank you.
Mobile's probably the most obvious.
How much
entry
is
for
the
that.
experience? We're targeting $1 a minute, including in and out time. So think of it as an 8-minute experience for $10. It seems to be the kind of pain point for consumers for trying something with almost no resistance versus that's pretty expensive. I don't know if I want to do that.
How do you charge?
We have a point of sale system is like an iPad that sits on a stand, and we have an attendant who
Attendant-based.
takes the money.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So Dave, you said you wanted to be an antagonist here. I'd love to hear your...
Who doesn't like a good villain?
Concerns.
No, here's the thing. I love VR. I think it's really great, and there's a lot of promise to it. And I think as a gaming experience, as a singular experience, as a home experience, it'd be great. I think there's also options in the real world, out in theme parks or museums or individual attractions. But those things are rife with a number of issues that VR is very difficult to get past and may not get past for a very long time. The biggest single issue for us in themed entertainment with VR, for us as we look at it, is, and what I'm talking about is what's available now, not what's available in 10 years, not once Magic Leap isn't the size of a refrigerator on your head. Like, it is. What we have right now. So, there's three things. There's one thing that breaks down into three components that we have an issue with, and that's scalability. And what I mean by scalability is, first and foremost, throughput. Your average theme park attraction for a major theme park needs to do between 1,500 and 2,000 people an hour. And if I can't do that, it's not worth building for $40 million or more, or 100 or 200. Second is scalability of demographic. And most theme park attractions that do well serve the widest possible audience. And right now, there's interocular problems below a certain age with VR. There's a lot of older people who it makes sick. So we have to keep that into account. If you're going to do it, it may not be an all ages experience. And then thirdly, the scalability of the financial part of it, which means not only cost per unit, but cost to scale up to 1,500 to 2,000 people an hour, plus every single one of those is a single point of failure. Plus, every single one of those has maintenance requirements and cleanliness and sterility and all those things that go with it. So I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying when our reaction right now when clients say, hey, we want VR, we go, hang on a minute. Let's figure out what your capacity is and what your budget is and what your audience is. And then we'll go from there. And I told you we're working on a major indoor theme park in another part of the world that has major VR components. But it's very specifically low capacity, high ticket cost for the entire facility, and a teen and adult only demographic. So that's what I mean by naysaying. There's possibilities for it, but it's not going to replace things like the Simpsons ride or Back to the Future or the Harry Potter ride, merely because of capacity and demographic primarily.
Yeah, I always think it's like, it's not about replacing, it's about just extending
Right.
our ecosystem, right?
Right.
Can I add to
Yeah,
that?
I was just
Very-
going to ask you a question, but please, go ahead.
Awesome. We're
Yeah.
on the same wavelength. I would say I think virtual reality as a term is still pretty vague and abstract. So when you talk about these theme park rides where you're immersed and it's a simulated environment, you feel like you're there. It sounds a lot like virtual reality.
Yeah.
So I think, as we think about virtual reality, we have a pretty broad definition. It doesn't need to be worn on your head. A dome experience is a virtual experience. We deal with simulations all day long. Anyone who's ever played a game from Nintendo back in the 80s and 90s, all the way through to Xbox and PS4 today, can relate to the fact that when you're immersed, even though it's a 2D experience within a frame, you feel like you are engaging with the characters in that simulated environment. It's nothing more than ones and zeros. I agree with you in terms of the headset experience,
Right.
but as we think about virtual reality, and I think we're on the same page here,
Yeah.
it could be used as a much broader term in the context of some of the applications we're talking about.
And is, for that matter. I mean, Disney, when they released Soarin' back in 1999, the radio ads were like, it's like a virtual reality ride, and no one knew what VR was, but it sounded cool, right? But simulators, like all the stuff at Universal, all of those things involve exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, can I be devil's advocate for a second? So 1,500 to 2,000 people is definitely a problem if you've spent $40 million on a theme park ride.
Or more, that's low.
I understand, but for a really cool VR experience, you don't need to spend anything remotely like $40 million. So in our little, hardware, which very, very low 5 figures, we can pay that back in 2 months with the throughput that we can get with 8 seats. So I think I completely agree with you that if you're adding if virtual reality is a huge component of a huge ride, physically based ride, then yeah, that's a huge problem. I think there's a different solution that's kind of lower down the value chain, where in a movie theater or a shopping mall or a theme park, you can put people through an incredible experience that can feel basically like a theme park ride without spending $40 or $100 million.
And I think that's the difference between an arcade and a theme park. Like, this is the modern day arcade that you're developing, right?
No, I would say the modern day movie theater more than that.
Interesting.
Gaming is an interesting, I think, subset of what VR is good for. But like I was saying before, when you start telling stories and connecting with people emotionally, and you can do that in a way that immerses the hell out of them, you have a very, very powerful combination. So, I get that, and we have a lot of venues that are arcades that we're going to put these into. But I think long-term, it's more of an entertainment platform that tells stories and sends people messages than, a gaming thing.
Interesting.
And Michael, just out of curiosity, IMAX announced that they're doing VR theater. Can you explain that to the audience? Do you have any insight on that you
Sure.
can describe what they're doing?
So I'm no longer involved with that particular initiative, so I don't want to speak out of turn. But at a high level, IMAX is creating VR arcades, which is why I use the term, which is low throughput. They're thinking about it as being an extension of the cinema experience. So it would potentially be a different way of experiencing the narratives and the characters and the worlds that you're seeing in these amazing films like Avatar and Jurassic Park and so on and so forth. But it's, as you were saying, it's low throughput, more of an intimate, out-of-home VR teaser for a lot of people. It will be their first experience with a VR headset. They're using custom hardware that is designed to correct for some of the shortcomings of some of the other hardware devices. So you have a wider field of view, more in line with IMAX theaters, higher resolution, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day,
Star VR, right?
Yeah.
I just saw it.
At the end of the day, it's all about narratives and augmenting those narratives through new media. But it's extending, in IMAX's case, extending the cinema experience into this new medium.
Thank you. And Jason, your experience with what your company has created, has it been primarily on the bigger studio VR experiences under the marketing budgets? Or how would you speak to that? from
There's
your
been a
company's
few.
perspective?
Yeah, there's been a few projects that spanned a a multitude of different financial sources. Speaking to Martian, we actually worked on The Martian last year, partnered with the VRC, which is doing the experience. MPC was doing the film. So we took those assets and created game assets to them and gave that to them. They gave it back. We created a teaser for it, and they're still working on the experience. And that was part of their promotional budget from Fox. And there's other projects that are still going and with that in mind. So there is money that's building with that in mind. Music videos, those are things that are coming from the labels to build VR, real-time game engine experiences for their artists. We're not quite getting Charmin commercials yet, but I'm sure they'll be around the corner sometimes.
I don't want to see a VR Charmin commercial. Let me just say that out front.
Looking up out of the toilet.
No, Ed. That didn't need to be said.
Let's just go back to teddy bears.
And speaking, Jim, you mentioned cinemas of the future. Ed, do you have any comments that you would want to add about are we going to be seeing full dome theaters in our movie complexes?
Yeah, there's a little chicken and egg issue with that. Unlike the headsets, that can proliferate really quick. The domes are slower, build-out kind of a thing, right? As been mentioned, domes have been in theme parks for a long time. Most of the projects we've done that are narrative are promotional in nature, other than some sort of in-house stuff that we've done. But ultimately, yes. I think after I call it Generation VR, Gen VR, whatever. The kids are not going to want to go out and watch a flat screen film, or at least put it this way. There's going to be more of a demand for immersive out-of-home entertainment, I think. The thing of it is, though, when you have a framed image, the storytelling that you can do with a frame is fundamentally different than when you have a frame-less image. Tight, lots of cuts and tight shot on micro expressions on someone's face. If you're doing that in a dome, the face gets rather big, right? It's not the same kind of a thing, So maybe there's some storytelling modalities we can use. But it's a fundamentally different kind of experience. I think of it as a tour bus through VR, where you have a group of people. Navigator takes a joystick and flies the audience through a virtual world like that. So it could be a video game spectator in a video game tournament as well.
Yeah, you do generative stuff on your domes too. It's not all rendered, right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
So in these early, I think what's so important too is the audience engagement factor, and how much there's such a move now for audience engagement and really looking at audiences as communities, not just bystanders that are passively engaging in our storytelling. But to that point, I think, Jim, I know you from Fourth Wall, when you launched Fourth Wall as an early transmedia, cross-platform company. And the Producers Guild has a credit, transmedia credit, which I think is relevant to how we can think about or strategically design where we're going with storytelling and franchise extensions, because how do we make sense of how we build these story worlds and then activate all these different platforms to reach different audiences with different devices that have different ways of exploring these story worlds. So to that end, what you guys have thoughts on that? Is how are you approaching your projects, and are you looking at things that way? Obviously, from the studio projects, it would be a way to design.
Again, I'm kind of a movie history nerd, so forgive me. But when they started telling stories, they had no idea what to call any of it, like special effects, editing, it was all just trying stuff out. And I think as we move along, we'll start to get that vocabulary in place, which should help the process. Because right now there's no shorthand. It's like that thing, where you move the camera here, but there isn't sort of the it's a close-up. Right. That terminology isn't there yet. And so I think a big part of that is just experimenting and everyone sort of agreeing by acclamation that, certain terms make sense.
I think the vocabulary is very vague. I mean, it's maybe QuickTime is to default for making a 360, sphere like a lat long be called VR, but some people would really, shake their head at that.
VR cinema, whatever,
So
And then if it's generative in a game engine, it's not that at all, right?
yeah, and purists would say that it has to be, each image has to be served up fresh, to your eyes, no matter what view you're seeing. So to be true VR. So it's interesting. There's certainly a lot of confusion about what's, when we're saying 360. I almost fall to the term omnidirectional stereo lat long, which is a real big term to make sure we're talking about.
That's catchy.
I'll take
the same-
omnidirectional lat long,
Yeah.
stereo lat long for 300, Alex.
Which is a very specific image that is a cheat. Really, it's not. Serving two images to your eyes can't really work. Because in perfect CG, I'm just going to go into this a little bit. The left and right eye, if you're rendering nodal, it comes from one point. You're rendering from your left eye and right eye comes from 2 points. However, if you're just from those two particular vantage points, you're going to, if you're looking behind us, your eyes swap. So the lat long, the omnidirectional stereo lat long, is a very particular cheat that allows you to see 360 degrees in stereo,
Yeah.
which is
mean-
not really VR.
Even
But-
worse, like 360-degree video on Facebook, people call that VR.
Yeah.
Which makes me mental. It's not. Does anybody actually like 360-degree video on the web? Do you use it? Like, is that really exciting, like to drag something around? Okay, that's great. I think you're a little younger than everyone, so maybe that's just me.
But we're
Yeah.
but what we're
There's
finding too,
applications.
But
for our projects though. I think it's interesting.
nobody else raised their hand, so I'm just saying.
Events, dear boy, events.
I think it's interesting too, from our promotional point of view. Our clients are buying the highest grade experience, so we're doing a real-time game engine.
Yeah.
However, there's such a small market for that.
Right.
We then render that out to a omnidirectional stereo lat long, which then goes to a headset, and then we create just one eye, send that to YouTube, and then you have the lowest common denominator, and gets it into the most people's hands. So yes, that experience is not the greatest, but it is hopefully drawing people into what people really want to see, what we want them to see, which is the
Well, that worries
Game
me
engine.
though, because if people call that VR and they're completely underwhelmed by it, then it's really hard to get somebody back.
Yeah.
Part of the reason why we're doing what we're doing is because we want as many live, warm bodies actually experiencing really kick-ass VR so that they become consumers over the long term. Because, I don't know, putting on a gear and seeing the camera move and being like, oh, that was all right. I'm not sure that that's going to build the industry the way we want it to.
That's definitely a tough project, and it's usually one by one that I've gone through all my friends and like, come over to my garage, check out the Vive.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
Right. Show
Holy
them
cow.
tilt brush.
Exactly.
Show them
Yeah.
tilt brush, and they're sold. I
Yeah,
mean, that
totally.
literally was the thing that unlocked it for me, and I'm sure a lot of other people. And I think that one of the reasons that is such a powerful thing is because it speaks directly to the core of what a VR experience really can be, which is about agency, and it's about my participation in a space. And to me, the range of things that have impressed me in VR are things that play on that agency in one way or another. Tilt brush is one, because the first thing I ever did in tilt brush was, because I'm not an artist, I can't draw for crap, so I was squiggling and I went like this, and then went, and like stuck my head in the hole and went, oh my God, that's so cool, right? So I have manipulation over this space. The other end of the spectrum would be horror experiences, because they completely remove my agency and force me into a situation I want to be in. And those two extremes are really powerful examples of where VR can be freaking amazing if the storytelling right. Even though tilt brush isn't a story experience, it's still something that you have agency in creating your own story, if you will.
Quill is coming out soon too, and I think that is something, talking about story,
Yeah.
telling stories with drawing.
Cool.
They're going to do that soon.
Cool.
And Michael, what is rooms.com?
So
Did you-
we develop virtual tours of home design portfolios. So the same way you'd go to Art Digest or to House to see two-dimensional images, we're basically creating the next generation of portfolio viewing where you can either through a PC, mobile tablet, or with a VR headset navigate a space in real time. There are all sorts of tags within the context of the model, so you can click on them and get some information. There are Easter eggs depending on what you're looking for, and in some cases you can click through to buy furniture or home decor elements that are being featured within that model.
Right. So what it really sounds like is it's many things. It's a 360 space that we're now all exploring. So whether it's still photography that you're looking through or virtual reality filmed experience like you're talking about, Jim, or spherical imagery on the dome, that's what really seems like this big breakthrough, is that we're now in spherical space. So how
Yeah, it's
we
huge.
explore that, how, the different ways it's used, whether it's in entertainment or education or medical or industrial, I think that's what's really key, is that we're now all exploring the 360 world.
And I
which
think
is
that-
super exciting.
Yeah, and I think for location-based stuff, the more it can become about the catharsis of being in a crowd, the better, even if that crowd's only 2 or 3 people. A group experience is what will differentiate it from home. There will be networked experiences at home, I know, but it's just not there yet. So
not there.
No, and like I went. Has anybody seen the Ghostbusters experience in New York? Did you guys see that? The one that Void did? Very much worth seeing. I didn't think I'd like it at all, but it's great. And the reason it's great is you see your friends as Ghostbusters, and you all go on the same mission. And it's a clever use of a very simple physical theatrical space that they reskin a couple of different ways as you move through with your friends. The tech has some ways to go, but as an experience, this 10-minute experience for $40, it actually was really, really compelling. But it was, if I did it myself, it wouldn't have been nearly as fun.
Yeah, right.
So,
And this is the thing about the domes, is that it really, it's like a community space, right? Like we did this dome for Stella Artois up in Toronto, and it was an 80-person immersive dining experience. So 360 video, 360 sound, aroma, even vibration, that was crazy. And the thing about it was, if you think about it, a 7-course meal, how are you going to do that with headsets on? Just getting the fork to your mouth could be a challenge, So, and it's the same like sports or anything like that.
Exactly.
Eating popcorn. Just some simple things, can be pretty challenging with a headset.
So I want to open up questions to the room, but real quick, could we just go across the panel? It's 2020. What would be a fun project that you would be doing in your company? Each one of you, just briefly, if you want to share. And then we'll have questions from the audience.
Well, I think it's really picks up where guys are talking about it. I think VR is going to be a social thing. It's right now. It tends to be very personal. You put your headset on. You're very, very, very vulnerable. The first thing that happens is people pull out a phone and start taking pictures. But yeah, it's just not something that's very comfortable around other people. But the social aspect of it, I think, will be in 2020. That's how you'll meet your friends.
Yeah.
It'll probably disconnect you from where you are locally, like a cell phone does. But in that sense, you'll be put closer to friends that are across town, across the country, around the world. And you'll be able to share those experiences, climb the mountain, conquer the planet type experiences that VR will allow you to do.
2020. So this is like borderline science fiction, but I think we'll bypass your eyeball entirely. So right now we're relying on human hardware to process data and trick your mind into believing that there's something that doesn't actually exist. At some point, we should be able to send brainwaves directly to your brain to, you will not be using your eyes to generate the imagery. It'll be a different way of accessing a different world just through closing your eyes.
But not by 2020.
I think by 2020.
Singularity.
Yeah.
Exponential.
Wow.
There's some
Yeah,
neuroscience there that needs
optimistic.
to get worked out.
I'll invest in that one.
It's interesting you say that because
Maybe 2025.
hedging that.
35.
Yeah, right.
What are you doing in that lab?
I was thinking the future. There's like a split where opaquing out all of your senses and replacing them with cyber, like you're saying. Ultimately, I mean, it's the matrix. Your body's floating in an amniotic fluid, and there's cords hooked into your nervous system. You're not present at all physically, but you're completely embodied in a cyber world with all your friends, right? The other direction I think is interesting are what I call sentient spaces, where you're walking about freely, but you have complete access to social online worlds and the internet and cyberspaces through gesture control and like that. So you could walk into a sentient space, reach up into the cloud, pull your personal data, throw it on a table, share photos with people, stuff like that. And so my 2020 project is a virtual reality nightclub where you have photonic go-go booths, and you're dancing in the go-go booth, and your avatar's up on the dome dancing, and you wave your hand, and fire shoots into infinite space.
You got to check out the Wave. Have you seen that yet?
Yeah.
It is an online. It's a VR discotheque with a DJ that's mixing live.
So that's where you meet. That's where you meet in the metaverse, and then you conspire to meet physically, and you have a 3D printed avatar mask of your avatar, and it's like a costume ball.
It's just, eyes wide shut all of a sudden here. I've been to Second Life. I know what goes on in there.
That's the back room.
It's, I think it's, if I were to be, I'll be a little more conservative, 4 years. I think it's two things. The first would be connected experiences, and what I mean by that is, whatever I do in a theme park or a museum, while I'm there, metrics while I'm there, similar to what, Disney's spending all this money on tracking with Magic Bands and tying that into your experience. If I could be tracked so it knows what I'm doing, it knows what I like, that if there's a home component of that I can use on my VR headset that connects me back and extends my experience beyond the four walls of the physical location, and then maybe for marketing reasons entices me to come back, or even has connected experiences that let me interact with park goers or museum goers in real time.
Yep.
I think that's one category that's super exciting to us, because that leverages what's great about it, which is a singular thing, but it does it in a way you can't just get by yourself at home. The second part would be, and even 4 years is probably a little aggressive, mixed reality AR. The minute Magic Leap becomes a pair of Wayfarers I can plug into my phone, and I can have Smurfs walking around this room, great. That changes dark rides, it changes live shows and parades, it changes everything I can do in a physical space. But realistically, that's kind of far off. Yep. We've seen it, it's really promising, but to scale it up to hundreds of thousands of people is a little ways off.
I'm going to play the jaded curmudgeon again.
Hooray!
So I love sci-fi. I can talk all day about the singularity and all kinds of futuristic stuff. In 2020, I hope to have thousands of our distribution points out there, and I hope that the living room is starting to actually take hold, that we have 1 million or 2 million or 3 million headsets out there, and there's a certain amount of revenue coming through it. I think realistically, if you look how long it takes to change consumer behavior, I think everyone in VR really needs to kind of take a step back, learn what we learned from Tulip Mania and the .com era, and realize that we can have a mass hypnosis of sorts, and let's not extend ourselves to the point where basically anything that happens is looked on as a failure because we've hyped it up so much. So I'm super optimistic about VR. I wouldn't be back in it after 20 years if I wasn't. But I think we have to temper our expectations. 4 years is not a long time.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Yeah.
What is the VR experience with you guys? Like when you're talking about getting into VR?
Are you talking?
No.
Yeah. Who do you mean, you guys?
IMAX you're talking about?
Are you talking about IMAX?
Yeah.
So again, I'm not personally involved in that initiative any longer, but it's basically an out-of-home headset-based experience. So much like what you saw earlier, it's you go to a venue, you put on the headset, you have a short-form experience, content experience for a ticket price.
Paired with an IMAX, most likely an IMAX venue or a standalone as well?
Not necessarily.
Okay, great, okay.
Is it just, you know, is it a pod, is it like?
It's a VR lounge with a headset, the headsets. And I think stand-up and sit-down, they're doing.
Right there?
Do any of you have any experience using or working with omnidirectional treadmills?
Yeah, I played one game on it once. It was not for me. I understand why a really competitive gamer might train for it, but it is more physical than sitting on your couch and playing Call of Duty, which I'm fine with, by the way. So I get why it sounds cool. I didn't find it to be a very compelling experience.
Try the hamster ball. You seen that one, the big hamster ball?
This question is for Jim. So in terms of the hardware,
Mhm.
are there plans of making it networkable so that it can do social?
Yeah, so if you saw the 8 together in a circle, yeah, I mean, it sort of lends itself to those sorts of experiences. I mean, realistically, in the short term, just getting a single person, and a single player experience is like, let's declare victory, right? But over the long term, absolutely, that's part of the reason for our design is because we want people to feel both physically and virtually in the same space.
Just really quickly, so I'm also thinking of offsite. So you can connect with somebody with
Yes,
a headset.
or in different locations in our own network, or absolutely. And eventually, that's where all of it goes. Like, I just see our pods and our hardware out there as just another place that people are doing VR. And yes, over the long term, they'll be connecting with people at home and on Facebook social graphs and all the rest of it. So definitely kind of where we're going. But in the short term, let's just get more than like us like actually experiencing something.
And there were things like that. There was a thing in the 90s called Virtual World Adventures that nobody remembers. It was in Pasadena. It was a networked experience. It connected to multiple sites around the world. But the problem was that the graphics and the technology, the development of the games was not where it's at now. It wasn't as easy. It was a lot more expensive. And so now that those are much more scaled down, as this guy well knows, that's the goal, is to create these centers where you can be connected to other people.
There's also 28K modems.
Yeah, right.
There's not a hell of a lot you can communicate with that.
Yes.
Just curious, in the concert, I heard there was a hologram a couple years ago, but then it just disappeared.
You're probably thinking of the Tupac hologram?
Yeah, which is a technique called musion. It's actually a 18th century magic illusion called Pepper's Ghost. It actually has nothing to do with VR. It's a reflected media gag on a piece of giant plastic in front of the stage.
Yeah, it's
Sorry to
not
burst your
even
bubble.
3D. Although digital,
It kind of disappeared though.
It still
It's
happens.
hard to do.
Yeah.
It's not easy to
hard
do.
to do well.
It's hard to do well. It has a very specific viewpoint. It's very hard to make interactive with the performers or the audience. It's usually canned media. If you've ever seen the ballroom scene in the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland, it's that, basically. But instead of a giant plane of glass, it's a stretch fabric or stretch plastic, and the monitors are down below reflecting. They use a similar technique at the Harry Potter attraction in the queue when you see Dumbledore and you see the kids in the dark arts classroom. That's all using hologram style media techniques, but they're not actually stereo.
Well, another example is also the pre-show for Fast and Furious.
Yep, right, exactly right, on the sides of the tram, the dance party.
Right there.
Can you guys talk about what you've learned in 2016 about public experiences, putting people in and out of these experiences? What's different now than 2015? What do you learn about what people want to watch? We know about how long roughly right now, but what experiences are they connecting with? Where is it going? Is it educational stuff? Is it like short films? What surprised you? I just want to hear from you guys.
Well, I'll tell you a very surprising story that has nothing to do with technology, but it shows how an audience likes to use spaces. I was at Wizarding World of Harry Potter, and I'm enjoying my butterbeer. And they sell school robes in the shop, so the kids all walk around in school robes. I was behind the Three Broomsticks restaurant enjoying my butterbeer, and I see a table full of kids, and they're all in school robes. They're all too young to work there. Right? This is in Florida, by the way, but rules still apply. They were all like middle schoolers, and they all had their noses in books. And I walked up to them, and I said, "What are you doing?" And they said, "Our homework." And I said, "What?" He said, "We go to Dr. Phillips Junior High. It's right behind the park. We have season passes to the park. Our parents drop us off and let us cosplay our homework." Let that settle in for a second. They're doing their real homework at a fake school. In a theme park.
As long as they're doing their homework.
As long as they're doing their homework, which I think
Anybody has kids.
which I think is awesome, right? It's showing that they are owning that experience emotionally, and that's what's important. Powder, for all its technological wizardry, which is beautiful. One of the reasons it really works is because emotionally it's simulacrum. It's Westworld. You walk in and you're right in the middle of it all, and people want to lean in. I think the difference between maybe not 2015 and 2016, but maybe 10, 15 years ago, you have a whole generation that's done cosplay, a whole generation of nerddom that's grown up and is very lean forward and wants to be in that world and wants to taste it. They want to be there.
That's LARPing.
LARPing is now the commonplace. Yep. Totally commonplace. Yeah. Disney bounding. Perfect example.
Yes.
One other thing that I've noticed personally, and maybe I'm a little bit biased because of what we're developing, but I've seen a focus shift from entertainment and in particular gaming to short form experiences and utilities. So home design, real estate, travel, where you have brands that are funding.
That's a huge one.
Yeah, they're funding short form experiences that are not for the purpose of entertainment so much as
Information.
Sampling.
information. Yeah, sampling, information. You want to know what your hotel room's going to look like before you go there. It's not the sexiest thing, but that's where VR can be really powerful.
Yeah.
Medical's another one.
Pay $8 for 10 minutes, or $10 for 8 minutes of sampling the hotel.
Well, I don't think those are the
That's
same.
not the revenue model.
It's not the revenue
They're
model.
different things, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Promotional.
what I've been seeing is a gradual shift from the novelty, like, demo crap that they had on the Oculus Store for the last 3 years to actual cool, engaging storytelling. And again, over time, for me, that's the exciting part of what's happening now, is you have Steven Spielberg is making VR content, which is,
Making a movie
great.
about it.
Yeah, and so for me, that's the shift that I'm gradually seeing, which is exciting.
This is a comment question. I went to a K-Tech thing, a French company had done it, and it was something like you're talking about, setting up, you sat, and there was this wonderful, totally experiential thing of a dancer dancing around you while you were in a space. And it was really powerful, and you really felt like you were there. And there was absolutely no story connected with it at all. It was just a total experience of this dancer, and you could shine a light, and you could do certain things in there. And very, very powerful and very wonderful, and I could see that people would want to go and have these kind of experiences and do these kind of experiences. I'm not opposed to stories, I like stories, but I think that in some ways, when I'm listening to a story, when I want to hear a story, I want to get through the story, I want to find out what happens. And in a way, that competes with an experiential experience at the same time, and trying to balance the two out is going to be interesting.
I agree, and I think story is a loaded word, especially in themed entertainment. It's often equated with narrative, which it isn't. What's the story of Space Mountain? Please, someone tell me. Right? So, you're on an awesome rocket ship. That's what it is. But I think in our world, and especially in theme parks, and certainly applies to museums as well, story is the engine of emotion. And that can be contextual. It doesn't have to be narrative-based. It doesn't have to be A to B linear, which all works really well with VR, actually. It works well with that agency issue.
I like to think of it as like a multi-dimensional space where you have one axis is story. If you have pure story, another axis is experience. And if you have pure story, no experience, it's a novel, right? You're imagining yourself into the story, but you're not experiencing except a book in your hands. A theme, like carnival rides, pure experience, no story, right? With theme parks, is like kind of blending the two. So you have some, Mickey Mouse or whatever, right? And then there's another axis, which is mediation. And so, like, it could be totally unmediated, like Second Life, and you're just bumming around in a metaverse, or it can be, like a movie that's completely mediated, or it can be in between, like a video game where there's some, narrative that sets it up, but then you're set loose to play.
And I think you could add fine art to that too, which I think
Yeah.
Audrey also creates.
I've seen
So
a
the fine
number
art.
of fine art VR experiences that
Yeah.
are really lovely.
Absolutely. Okay, we have time for one more question. You've been so patient.
I'm like, this is my panel. I'm super stoked that you guys are here. I wish we'd just bring the free alcohol up here and just keep this going for the next 3 hours.
Thank you.
Yes.
Right. So I'm really, no pun, immersed in this space. I'm developing content for IMAX VR and potentially Jim's company. We're working on a live action volume mention feature, and then we're doing a featurette of the feature, just tons of stuff in this space. I actually forgot what my question was, but I'll just wing it here. I love that it's interesting where even when we've assembled a panel, there are so many unique points of view. I think that that's one of the most interesting thing about the out-of-home location-based experiences, that no one has a real clear vision of where it's going to go or what it's going to do. But I think that since, this, in my mind, other than cave art and, plays, Disneyland really invented this idea of there being some place that you go that has the thing better than the thing that you have at your house. And I don't know if you guys agree with that. I think that that's the model of wherever we're at home, we have to build better. So you leave the house and then do that thing.
Aristotle sort of did first, just so you know. But
I was going to say Greek theater.
but point taken. But point taken. I know what you mean. I'm totally joking.
No, it's true, and like what Jim's doing, using high-performance computers, the domes. I mean, we're looking at $250,000 supercomputer graphics machines that can deliver.
No matter what, you can't do that at your house.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Otherwise,
Right.
you're gonna-
And I think people like to be in community as well.
Yeah, it's a social experience as well.
Yeah.
the other thing.
Yep. So, thank you to each of you for sharing
Thanks.
your experiences and knowledge, and to you all for your good questions. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks.